Hey everybody, this is Jason Ostrowski, and welcome to another edition of the Everything Real Estate Podcast. I hope all of you are gearing up for what's undoubtedly our busiest season of the year, and that is our spring market. Today, we've got an episode that's not only timely, but could be very handy for any of you looking to elevate your listing presentation process. And we're going to do it all with the help of my special guest. His name is Brian Spangler, co-team leader of the award-winning Spangler Manners team out of our Chadsford office. And today, he's here to share some of his process when it comes to his listing consultations. We'll take a deep dive into the systematic approach to listing appointments, and Brian will be sharing his insights that have helped propel his team to Chairman Circle Platinum. So if you're looking for a few new tips to add to your listing presentation, or maybe even a complete overhaul, today's episode is for you. Let's get right into it with Brian, and we'll pick it up on the other side. We're lucky to have Brian Spangler from the Spangler Manners team on the podcast today. Brian, it's so good to have you here, man. I'm excited that we finally were able to sync up together. And recently, you and I were at an event in the city where you had the opportunity to be a panelist to talk about some best listing practices with your sellers. And I was really impressed with your systematic approach to your listing appointments. And since it's that time of year, where hopefully our phone is ringing with the potential sellers asking us to come list our homes, I thought it would be a great time to have you on the podcast to discuss that systematic approach to your listing appointments so agents can take a little away from what you do to win listings. So with all that said, I want to start with a hypothetical with you. Let's say you get a phone call today, and it's one of your past clients. They're going to be referring a new listing lead to you. How do you start to reach out to that warm lead, number one? And would that start be the same if you got a call from a complete stranger that found you online and wants you and your team to list their home? So do you start with the same process regardless of it's a warm or cold lead? And what does that look like when you start?
Well, first off, thanks for having me.
That was a mouthful, by the way. I apologize for that. I may have to cut that down in editing.
No worries at all. So it's a good question. We, as a team, we all try to take each lead, whether it's warm or cold, as our same process every single time. Obviously, if it's a warm handoff from a past client that has referred us, which is 86% of my business is referral. It's handled a little bit differently, just in the fact that we have somebody to kind of, lean on, so to speak, when we make that first call. We always try to get the phone number and email from the client that referred us, so we can do the reaching out. I don't necessarily like to just wait for my phone to ring, because somebody can always tell you, "Hey, I referred you," and expect the call. The call never comes. But that at least they're thinking about it. So the more information and the more data that we can get from our client, the easier the approach is when reaching out. We always try to get the appointment, even if they're not, if they're thinking about selling at the end of the year or even further. As soon as our past client reaches out to us, we explain the benefits of getting us in the door as soon as possible to, explain just market conditions, get you prepared as soon as possible so you're ready for when that time does come. We always do a personal note as soon as the phone call is over with our past client, or even a text after they send us the lead. We thank them with a little referral gift to thank them. And then we always will follow up with a personal note to the lead itself as well. We do the same thing with a cold lead. If somebody calls us from Google or social media that we don't really know, or if we get a referral that the person that referred us didn't tell us about, we just try to treat them as warm as possible. But the first and foremost is getting that appointment as soon as possible.
Well, I think you bring up a great point where you don't sit back passively and wait for someone to give you a call. You want their information and you want to call them right away. And I think that's a very important point because like you said, a lot of times when you sit back and wait, it just doesn't happen. So to all the agents that are listening out there, the takeaway is be proactive, get that information and give them a call. I totally agree with that. So if you get into that initial phone conversation, or maybe it's a Zoom is part of your process, I'm not sure, we'll get into that, and you start asking, say, qualifying questions to your client, right? Do you have a process or a templated, say, question checklist that you may use that maybe you found through a system like Buffini or Ninja, or maybe online at Tom Ferry, questionnaire that you may use for each client? Or do you have a different conversation that's tailored to each individual potential seller? Do you feel them out as part of the process with your initial phone conversation or Zoom conversation?
Yeah, so I'm coached by Buffini, like a lot of Berkshire Hathaway agents. So I do have a sort of templated response for questions. I try to always find out if they've done any updates recently that I can't find on the MLS. I want to know different kind of things that they've done throughout the years and what their motivation points are before meeting with them, just so I can kind of gauge their overall motivation on how quickly they want to sell. However, all of our listing appointments, and including that initial call, they're all conversational. Every person is different. We harp on, the character tests, and I'm drawing a blank on what the name is right now.
That's all right. They have many names, but disc assessments, whatever.
Yeah, the disc assessment. So those, everybody's different in kind of how they want to be sold, so to speak. So the more conversational that we can make it, the easier they open up to us, and we find out exactly, what they're looking for out of us. Because what we don't want to happen is just sound like a robot, go through everything. And if we're not tailoring it to their personality, let's say an engineer, for example, they're more analytical. If we don't go in enough depth and we kind of put a lot of fluff in, they're going to hang up the phone, or they're not even going to want to meet, and they're going to want to find somebody that suits them better. So it's a healthy balance of trying to probe, engage motivation, but also tailoring it to them.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you bring it up because I almost equate it to doing this podcast. You and I were talking yesterday on the phone a little bit that I like to have the podcast be very conversational, but it really depends on the personality type. There are certain people that have come on this podcast that absolutely positively will not come on this podcast unless they have the questions ahead of time, right? They're definitely afraid of the spontaneity of that. And I totally understand. It really depends on the personality type. And so if you do end up setting this appointment, right, you talk to them on the phone, you talked about their motivation points, right? You're finding that stuff out. You're having that initial consult. You set that appointment. You're going to be heading out to their property. Are you a one-step guy, a two-step guy, somewhere in between? Do you do both depending on the situation? Is there an advantage in your mind to do either the one-step or the two-step? And do you always follow the same process, or does it depend on timing?
So I never like to say always. Every situation is different. However, the majority of our process is a two-step process. I don't think that we can give the sellers, a fair service by giving them a price on the first meeting. Even if we ask the questions on the phone, what kind of updates have you done? We need to see the house in person and then go back to look at the comps and really compare what we just saw with our own eyes. I rarely have any pushback on the second appointment. And the way that, we just kind of put it to our sellers is, hey, we want to do you the best service as possible. We want to go back, do our homework after seeing it. That way, we can really dive into the comparable properties and how they compare to yours, in the last 6 months or a year, whatever it is. Now, again, that doesn't always work with colder leads. Referrals, obviously, 99% of the time that they're going to be fine with the second appointment. But if it's a colder lead that calls in and they might be interviewing other agents, we all know it's beneficial to usually be the first one in. And most of them are looking just for price. So I try to still do the second appointment, but again, it's a conversation gauging how much time they have, how motivated they are, and if they're really connecting with me. If I feel that I need to give them pricing, I try to be a little bit more vague, and I'll still bring the comps, and we'll do and I'll bring my computer sometimes, and we'll do the search together, which really helps. But 99% of the time, we're really trying to separate into two to really do our homework.
I know everybody has their process, and I'm always intrigued by, someone who is very successful at what they do. What is their process, right? Because there's always bits and pieces that I think we're going to take and meld into our own particular style when we go out to a listing appointment. So when you do go out to that initial consult, let's just call it the first step in the process. So much of what we do is building rapport, right? And finding common interests with people. Is there anything in particular that you do to best find common ground with your sellers in order to gain their trust? Are you researching them online prior to going out there? Are you having that conversation over the phone? So when you do go out, you have some common ground. How do you best do that? Because I know for me, I like to tour the home, right? And I like to go around with the seller. Most people do. But one of the things that I'm looking for as we're going through the property together is common ground. And so I don't just ask about the property. I want to know about them. So that builds that trust between us without them even knowing that's what we're doing. So how do you go about building rapport with the seller?
Absolutely. So we do the same. Obviously, we try to build as much rapport on that first phone call as we possibly can, but not being face to face, it can be a little bit challenging, especially if they don't know you that well, to really get that personal information out. Sometimes I do Facebook them, to just see if there's any quick, easy things that are that I can bring up in a non-creepy way. To really get them to open up. But no, we do the same exact thing. As we're going around the house, we're pointing out, really nice updates that they've done or just great features of their house, but also looking at personal, vacation photos. Maybe they've been to the same place as us, wedding photos, asking how long they've been married, stuff like that. It's really just trying to find anything in the home that's not necessarily going to provide value as far as the valuation, but it's going to make us, that connection stronger, the more that we can get them to open up and connect.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a great point is seeing those pictures in the house. There's always there's some connection with everybody. That 6 degrees of separation or 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, everybody always used to say, right? Somehow we are all related to one another in some form or fashion. We just have to find that a lot of times. And I think building rapport is one of, if we're just talking about going out to a listing appointment, building a rapport is such, I feel like, an undervalued thing. I think so much of it is in building that rapport with your potential seller. They want to like you before they're going to do business with you. So once we're in that listing appointment, and now we're getting into the nitty gritty of stuff. You talked about bringing your comps out to the property. Maybe you have your marketing plan that you're going over with people. What are some go-to programs that you use either from Fox and Roach, outside of Fox and Roach? What are you using, if we can get into some of the particulars that your go-to programs are for putting a listing presentation together?
Yeah, so Fox and Roach has a ton of amazing tools. So as I mentioned before, we do it in a two-step process. The first appointment, we actually don't bring comps. This is our overall, process that's not sped up. These are for our referrals and everything that we know we have our two-step to do. So the first one, we take all of the listing paperwork that will be signed from, zip forms. We have a bunch of packets in our office ready to go. We put some marketing information on the right side about our team, our past sales. We do listing statistics, days on market, and then we do our overall sales, buyers and sellers, our total volume for the year. We put a resume for each agent in. If it's whoever the listing agent is, who they're going for, they put a resume in, and then just an overall view of how we market our properties. So the goal of the first appointment is to see the house and build that rapport. And if we built rapport well enough, we try to get the listing paperwork actually signed on that first appointment. And the way that we usually do that is just explaining, hey, we don't have to figure out the price right now. It's a team effort between us. We'll give you our suggestions on the second meeting after we do our homework, go through the comps together. But at the end of the day, you set the price. We'll just tell you where we think it needs to be for this market. So that's our first appointment. Second appointment, then we always follow up our first appointment with a personal note, big Buffini guy. And then the second appointment, we use Moxie. So I'm really happy that Fox and Roach has decided not to get rid of Moxie. So we do all of our second ones. I know you mentioned earlier if we like to do Zoom or in person. I think in person is always best when possible. So we'll print out the full Moxie report, put all the comps in there, put our sales statistics back in there with marketing info. But this way we're we're leaning on Berkshire Hathaway's name, but then also adding in Spangler Manor's team's value as well. So, they're kind of getting both for the price of one. But we bind the Moxie report in a really nice booklet for them. And then they have that with the Berkshire Hathaway folder with all the listing paperwork together. And then that second meeting, we kind of conclude everything.
Yeah, I like that process. I use Moxie a lot, and I too am very happy that we kept Moxie. No offense to KV Presents, I totally get it if that's what you're using. I do like Moxie, and I add my own custom slides into that presentation. Mm-hmm. I like to have a digital presentation if I can to go over, as well as a booklet that I can leave with them, because you never know when internet's going to conk out. You're using your phone as a hotspot and it's slow. So I always like to have a paper backup if I can do that when I go out. So I'm going to ask you a very strange question here. All right. So I did notice, I want to say, I did take note that when you were on this panel that we were talking about, you were in a very nice suit. You were very well dressed, very, very good presentation for yourself, right? So have you ever been told that you won a listing by your personal presentation, meaning your suit, your car, the way that you present yourself? Because I'm not trying to toot my own horn here, but I have gotten listings. People have flat out told me that it was the way that you were dressed and the way that you presented yourself that you actually won that listing. Have you ever been told that in your career?
I have not, actually. However, I do think that it has helped tremendously. I just think that our profession as a whole is sometimes a little too lax. So I do take pride in the way that I dress. I think dressing for success is it's a cliche, but I do think that it really sets yourself apart from somebody else that if you're competing with, somebody who's going in even nice jeans and, a vest or, Patagonia or something. Now, do I wear a suit and tie every day? Usually, but I'm a casual Friday today. But always listing appointments. Every listing appointment is a suit and tie no matter what. Now, on the flip side, I don't know if you want to cut this out, but I did lose a listing one time because I was in a suit and tie and drive a BMW.
Really?
Yeah, so that was weird. And it was a referral from one of Susan's clients. He kept saying how nice I look. He's like, "Oh, you look like a banker. You look so nice." And then he went out to my car. He's like, "Oh, I love your car. It's a really nice BMW." I was like, "Yeah, thank you." Thought I crushed the listing appointment, and he called me back. He's like, "Yeah, well, it seems like you only do $1 million plus properties." Even though I harped on our listing statistics, our average, is 500, and this house was 4 something. So he's like, "Yeah, I just think we're going to go with an agent that doesn't do as much business." I was like, "Well, that doesn't make any sense."
That's amazing to me, because yeah. I will tell you, I guess it could be counterproductive. I'm glad I asked this question, because I guess I'm on my soapbox here. Maybe I'm old school. Maybe I'm getting a little too old, but I do feel like ever since the pandemic, we've gotten more casual, which is perfectly fine, right? But my point is that when everybody goes right, you maybe want to take a left, right? Maybe you lean into that differentiator. And sometimes when all things are equal, sometimes it's just your presentation of yourself when you go out to a listing presentation that's going to make that difference, right? So I'm like you, I'm always in a suit and a tie. I'm always, yeah, I do think about the car that I drive. I'm not saying you have to go out tomorrow and get a great BMW or, a Maserati, right? That's not what I'm saying. But having your car clean, having, just the presentation itself all matters when, in a very competitive environment that we may be in. Perception is reality, right?
Agreed. And I think that just dressing up honestly just exudes confidence as well. It's not arrogance, it's confidence. I think it really it just separates yourself from everybody else. Just because I mean, you can attest, we don't see very many realtors in specific, but just people in general anymore wearing suit and ties. So I think whether the client wears them or not, I think they see the value as first impressions go.
I think that is interesting, though, that like that the guy penalized you for wearing a suit.
Yeah, he was so nice the whole time too. He's like complimenting me on everything, and then it was like, "Nah, you do too much business." Well, I'll sell your house for more.
That is so interesting to me. All right, so I'm going to ask you kind of another offbeat question here. What do you feel like is one underrated aspect of your listing presentation that agents tend to forget about, or maybe they don't even cover it in general, that may give you a leg up on the competition when you go out?
That's a good question.
Maybe I should have given you that question. I don't know.
Honestly, I mean, I think it's just, I don't think enough agents do enough homework. I don't think they know their listing presentation front to back, or maybe the market that they're presenting for. I think spending that extra 30 minutes to an hour to just review every single comp over and over so you can just talk about it at the presentation off the cuff. I don't think it's necessarily about forgetting to bring anything. I think it's more just making sure that you know what you're presenting front to back.
Well, and I think that's a great answer, and I agree with you 100%. And to kind of follow up on that, it kind of goes into my next question for you, because if you're in competition with another agent for a listing, the seller, tells you that they interviewed an agent before you got there, and that agent will list the property for a full % less than what you are offering commission-wise. How do you approach that conversation with the seller in order to win out on that listing? It may speak to what we were just talking about knowing that market, knowing that area, knowing your presentation front to back. What would you say to win out on a listing where someone's going to discount their commission heavily?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it comes up all the time. And I think that first and foremost, rapport, like you mentioned earlier at the beginning of the podcast, if people want to do business with friends that they trust, I think building rapport right away eases these conversations about commission. But if you're competing with somebody who's willing to lower their commission by a full %, I think it's important to have the conversation with the seller about, well, what are they promising marketing wise? And do you think that they're going to fight every step of the way to net you as much money possible? If they're that quick to give up, their own money to put food on their table, what does it show when they're negotiating on your behalf? Are they looking for just a quick paycheck, or do they actually want to fulfill their fiduciary duty, and represent you to the fullest?
I also think that it separates the serious from the unserious, right? Because the low-hanging fruit, the easy thing to do for every agent out there is just to give away their value. And I feel like there's nothing that irritates me more than when someone is, and I'm not going to use specific percentages here, but I'm just going to say heavily discount to the point where they're hardly making any money on the transaction. They're basically working for free because they can't sell their value well enough to the seller and find that common ground like you talked about, where they want to, the seller wants to use you, but they are looking for the cheapest route, right? And sometimes I think we have to stand up and say, no, I am worth this. And so that's again, I'm going to be on my soapbox being irritated about that until the day I die, because I feel like we see more and more of that right now. And that's why I wanted to ask you that question.
No, and you're 100% right. And we are seeing more and more about it, every day. But I think without, at least what I've found with our kind of systematic approach, what we're talking about here in our listing appointments, it's easier to build the value on what you provide when you separate it the way that we do and really spend the time and the expertise, that it makes those conversations that much easier when you've already sold yourself throughout. And it goes right into pricing their home as well. Taking commission out, another agent may have overpriced their house and told them, well, we can get $100,000 more, which this story actually happened recently with one of my listings. And we came in, it was about $100,000 less. They ended up going with us because they trusted that we weren't just trying to get the listing by giving them a crazy number and was going to, discount or try to get price reductions throughout the whole time. We told them how to set their property up for success and what exactly we were going to do to market it, and proved why we thought it was that price versus the higher price.
Yeah, I mean, buying the listing is an age-old dilemma, and I totally agree with you. There are agents out there that know that the house is just completely overpriced. They just want the listing. And again, it's providing value and making sure that we're representing our clients the best that we can. And one way to do that is to tell them the absolute truth about where things stand. Sometimes conversations are difficult, right? But we have to do our job. So, all right. So in your mind, how do you turn your listings into more listings? What's your best approach when, they're saying for every listing, maybe you get 2 other listings, right? Listings are where it's at. So how do you best turn your listings into future listings?
Yeah. So again, I can't stress enough, we're Buffini agents. So throughout multiple times throughout the process, we're always asking directly for referrals. So when somebody is selling or even buying, you start to hear other people, whether it's work, family, friends, start and talk about, who's your agent? We've thought about it, but put it in the back burner. So I think it's really important to just explain how to give and accept referrals to your clients, because they are hearing these conversations every day. And whether it's just, hey, I've thought about it, but we're not really ready, that's a trigger. Hey, let me know. I'll reach out to them and give them any information that they need, provide as much free value as possible. Now, outside of the referral realm, what we do is a lot of the times, depending on the neighborhood, but we'll do neighborhood exclusive open houses as well. So like you mentioned, another 2 listings out of it, we know statistically from NAR that in a single neighborhood within the next 6 months, 2 to 3 more houses will pop up for sale. So we try to do our open house, whether it's 11 to 1 or 1 to 3, but the first hour before that, so it's a 3-hour open house, that first hour is reserved just for the neighbors. And then we go around door knock. If it's a Sunday open house, I'll go around on Thursday and door knock, give them a flyer. We do a free Nest ring or a Nest doorbell as a giveaway. All they have to do is sign in with their phone and email and name. And then they're entered to win that. Neighbors absolutely love it. Every time you go up to their door, there's no pushback. They just like to be invited somewhere. And then also using Cole Realty that Fox and Roach now provides us, which is an incredible tool. Kind of like the white pages, for those of us that know about phone books, looking up people's phone numbers within a radius of where that house sold and just calling them. I use Jimmy Burgess's script. He's incredible with these things, but just keep it short and sweet. and just talk about, hey, did you see the details about this house that just sold or I just listed? Just want to invite you to the open house, or did you get those details? Maybe you're thinking, or, have you heard another neighbor thinking about selling? I think it's really just making as many contacts around your listings to generate more listings.
And Brian, I mean, that is such great information right there. And coming from someone who has not been in the business that long, I mean, you've been in the business 6-7 years. And right then and right there, I can tell why you're successful is just doing that. That's a differentiator from just about, 95% of the agents out there, what you're doing. I love that Nest, thermostat kind of giveaway thing. That's a fantastic idea. I love that. I love the first hour being strictly for the neighborhood and following up with Cole Realty. Cole's been around forever. And the fact that we at Fox and Roach now have that at our disposal, I don't know how many agents are using it, but you're using it very effectively, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's a great tool. And obviously you got to still they scrub the DNC for you. I don't ever call DNC. Obviously it's highly illegal. But it either says they're on the DNC or okay. And even we'll send out mailers if the majority of them are DNC, or, sometimes you can get emails and I send a video message. I use BombBomb through my CRM to push out video messages to neighborhoods. So there's a lot of tools at our disposal. I always recommend choosing 3 to 4 of them and get really familiar with them. You can kind of get lost in our toolbox, but there's a lot of really good tools out there to generate new listings.
Yeah, and you mentioned BombBomb. I'm a huge BombBomb guy. Send out a BombBomb video with every offer that I make and to clients. And I know there's other very successful agents that use BombBomb to their advantage. So, all right. So I'm gonna hit you with a last question here. All right, because I want to get you out of here on time. So you grew up in the Buffalo area, right?
I grew up in my early years in the Buffalo area.
Yes. Are you a Bills fan?
Diehard Bills and
You're
Sabres.
diehard Bills fan, member of the Bills Mafia, all that good stuff. So
yes.
I have a hypothetical real estate question for you. All right.
Okay.
So would you rather wear a Patrick Mahomes jersey to a Bills home game or cold call expired listings for a year straight, knowing that you wouldn't get one listing out of it?
Oh, that's tough. I'd have to go expired. I can't wear a Mahomes jersey ever.
I think you and I have a shared hatred for Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah,
what he's done to us over the season. So I am not surprised that you picked that, but I can't think of a thing more unpleasant than cold calling a year straight. And yeah. I might have to pick the Mahomes jersey,
especially being a Buffini guy and doing referral. I'm not a big cold caller, but I just don't think I could do it. I don't think I could wear Mahomes.
Oh, man. Well, I feel for you, as always. It's tough being a Bills fan. It's tough being a Philly fan. So you have 2 areas that you have to probably pine over sports-wise every year. So, well, I wanted to thank you for doing this, Brian. It was really a pleasure. I think there's some great information on this podcast for agents to take away, incorporate into their own listing presentations. And I just thank you for sharing that with the audience.
No, it's my pleasure. I really appreciate the invite. It was awesome hanging out with you at the Elite Mastermind in Philly, and it's all about building relationships. Whether it's potential clients or other agents in the industry. It's a fun business. Yeah, man, it was great to talk to you, get to know you a bit, and I wish you nothing but continued success here in 2024. And I don't know if you're going to the convention, but maybe I'll see you down there. Oh, I'll be there. Can't wait. Well, then we'll definitely hang out down there. All right. Great talking to you. I'll let you go. Thanks, Jason. Take care. That was the conversation with Brian Spangler from the Spangler Manners team. It was great picking his brain for a bit. Here are a few takeaways from talking to Brian. Number 1, the thing that strikes me most about talking with Brian is his preparation for his listing appointments from the start of the process, that initial phone call with the potential client, to after the listing presentation has been completed and his follow-up process. The point is, Brian is always prepared. So what that means to me is make sure that you know your comps from front to back.
Make sure you can effectively communicate your marketing plan to a seller and get them excited about what you're going to do to market their home. And make sure that you have your unique value proposition. That means if you sell a lot of properties, have your statistics ready to go. What is your list price to sold price? If it's impressive, you want to lean into that. And if you haven't sold a lot of properties, lean into the company. What can they do for your potential client, and how can you use that to your advantage? Number 2, Brian tries to turn his listings into more listings. Now, what does that look like? Brian specifically mentions having a dedicated hour strictly for the neighborhood, strictly for the neighbors at an open house. And he also ties that to a giveaway to get their contact information. He knocks maybe door to door prior to that open house just to make them aware that they are invited, they can be held in this raffle, and that they should come out to the property. That is the hard work that gets more listings out of your listings. Brian also uses Cole Realty to his advantage, and for those of you who don't know Cole Realty, it acts almost like a digital white pages where you can look up the contact information for a certain neighborhood, a certain area, and use that to your advantage when you're trying to gain listings or market a property. It's a great tool to add to your business in order to get new listings. Last but not least, and this is a very simple thing, but you should always do this, make sure that you print out your listing paperwork and bring it with you to every listing appointment that you go to. You never know what could happen at a listing appointment. Maybe they love you and maybe they want to sign with you right on the spot. So always have your listing paperwork handy, have it ready to go, and sign that listing as soon as possible. Well, that's it for the podcast this week. We will be back in another couple of weeks with a new topic, a new guest, and as always, if you want to hear something that we haven't covered yet, please reach out to me, jason.ostrowski@foxroach.com. And if you haven't liked or subscribed to the podcast or left us a review yet, please do so. It helps us to reach more people. Once again, this is Jason Ostrowski saying stay safe out there, stay selling, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Everything Real Estate Podcast.